Hi, welcome to Kloeker Education Foundation, where we provide quality content for amazing teachers and students. If you've seen our other series, welcome back. If this is your first time, we're glad you're here. This series is our Intro to Business class, and this lesson is on the types of business ownership. Let's dive in. Now, there are two main objectives for this lesson. To A, explain the most common forms of business ownership found within private enterprise, and B, to discuss business startup strategies. First, getting into the most common forms of business ownership within private enterprise systems. Let's take a moment. Imagine, if you will, Pete. Pete has a gutter cleaning business and it has been growing rapidly over the past 5 years. And now Pete is having difficulty keeping up with all of the clients and the work. Pete needs to either 1, hire an employee, or 2, take on a partner to expand his business to meet the demands. Take a moment and think, what would you do if you were in Pete's situation? There are pros and cons to your decision. Your choice should suit what your needs are and the objectives of your business. How your business is formed is going to impact things such as your business activities, risk, and responsibility. So take a moment and think, what would you do if you were in Pete's shoes? Now, the importance of ownership depends on quite a few things. A, your personal circumstances, B, your financial needs, and C, the type of business that you're owning and operating. Now, choosing the appropriate structure is important because it affects your A, taxation, B, your liability, and C, ownership control of the business. The three main forms of business ownership are, number 1, sole proprietorship, 2, a partnership, or 3, corporate ownership, also called a corporation. In a sole proprietorship, that business is owned by one person, one individual. Nearly 80% of all U.S. businesses are sole proprietorships, where the owner receives all profits and takes all risk and liability with running that business. In a sole proprietorship, these businesses are usually fairly small with fewer than 50 employees, often chosen because they're easily managed by an owner or someone that the owner hires, often found in small local businesses and home-based businesses, commonly called mom and pop shops. You can probably think of a few just in your neighborhood or around your school. Sole proprietorships receive minimal government intervention. The government is not really going to get involved in those businesses. Business and personal taxes are not separated, and so that must all fall on the owner and that responsibility. It usually does not need a lot of capital to get started because all the business and all the money is being generated by the owner. The second most common type of business ownership in the United States is a partnership. Owned by 2 or more people, yes, a partnership can be more than just 2 individuals. They're often formed to combine capital, combine experiences, and the abilities of the owners to operate it. The partners share the chance for profits and the risk for losses, and partners decide what each owner will get based off of what they contribute to the business. Partnerships are further broken down into 2 basic types: a general partnership, where each partner has unlimited liability, and a limited partnership, where partners have limited liability. Limited partnerships are more complicated to set up than a general partnership, where both members share liability for the business, and partnership laws vary from state to state. Partnerships can be used for most types of businesses in the United States. A corporation, our third type of business ownership, is often referred to as an artificial being, indivisible, intangible, and only existing in contemplation, as stated by our U.S. Supreme Court. It functions independently of its owners. It's treated as its own individual with legal rights, duties, powers, and obligations. A corporation has the ability to borrow and lend money, buy and sell goods, make contracts, sue or be sued, and has an unlimited lifespan that may exceed the lifespan of its original founders. In a corporation, to be an owner, a person purchases shares of stock in that corporation. The more share a person owns in that corporation, the more control that person has. Only a minority of U.S. businesses are corporations. However, they generate a majority of sales across the nation. They're subject to more government regulation than a sole proprietorship or a partnership, and often governed by a board of directors or a board of executives. There are several types of corporations. There are private or closed corporations, a subchapter S corporation, a public corporation, also known as an open corporation, and a nonprofit corporation. A private or closed corporation does not offer shares to the general public. They might have just a few stakeholders or shareholders, and shareholders often operate and manage the business, usually not required to make its financial activities and financial information public. Reasons, a private corporation or a closed corporation must prepare tax reports in the state of which it operates and is subject to dual taxation, which means it is taxed on both profits made by the company itself and by shareholders taxed on the dividends. Subchapter or S corporations is a private corporation with special benefits designed to help small businesses. It's taxed as a partnership to avoid dual taxation. To qualify, a S chapter corporation must have 100 or fewer shareholders and adhere to the government policies. Public or open corporations can sell millions of shares of stock to the general public and have thousands of owners who own a share of the company. They are subject to more government regulation and taxation than other forms of ownership because of that. And because they are an open corporation, they must provide financial information to the public in an annual report. It is subject to dual taxation, taxed on both the profits and the dividends paid out to shareholders. Nonprofit corporations are operated in order to accomplish a specific mission other than just making a profit, hence the name nonprofit. They usually help society with charitable, educational, religious, or scientific acts, and income is used to fund the program and cover operational expenses. They're generally not taxed by the federal government, and they mainly rely on donations and grants to fund their business activities. Now, corporations can grow in several types of ways. One is a merger. This is where two corporations combine into a single entity. Typically occurs when a larger company acquires a smaller one, known as an acquisition, or through a consolidation, where companies are breaking down into smaller pieces to focus on what they are good at. The strategy entails the acquisition of multiple smaller corporations to streamline operations and increase their market presence. And corporations can grow through expansion. Of course, this means by selling more stock, reinvesting the profits, or obtaining bank loans to expand their operation and business activities. There are hybrid structures within these that enable owners or members to benefit from the advantages of both a corporation and a sole proprietorship or partnership. It can be structured in one of two ways based on the number of owners: a LLP, a limited liability partnership, or an LLC, a limited liability company. These hybrid structures can allow members to determine how to manage the company and share profits, including limited liability, the limited life of a company, limited taxation, or how many owners and partners this structure will take on. The second half of this lesson dives into our second objective, which is to discuss different business startup strategies and how to best achieve the desired result. We are going to cover 4 different types of business startup strategies in this lesson. That would be franchising, multi-level marketing, licensing, and a joint venture. Now, you are probably familiar with franchising, at least an idea, not necessarily the term. Franchising is a method of distributing recognized goods and services through a legal agreement between 2 parties. A franchisor is a company that sells the rights to own and operate one of its businesses. For example, a McDonald's, a Shell gas station, a Subway. These are owned by an individual who bought a franchise license from the franchisor to own and operate one of the businesses. A franchisee is the person who purchased that right from the franchisor, often desirable ownership because the product has already been established with brand and a solid reputation. To own a franchise, you must sign an agreement with the franchisor and pay an initial fee. That is, of course, variant depending on what franchise you want to open. Some of them have incredibly high franchising fees. Some of them have mandatory training programs like Chick-fil-A, where they will pay for the cost of construction if you are accepted in the franchising application. As a franchisee, you may be responsible to cover the cost of the facility construction, leasing the land, equipment, insurance, legal fees. You may be required to pay a royalty based on your profits to the franchisor, and you would be required to cover your own advertising expenses. Now, franchising is a very valid option. It can be very expensive to start because of all the upfront costs, but it can be very profitable in the long run because it is an established brand and reputation that has proven market. In franchises, of course, there's the business format. They're found in almost every and all industry. They're usually available to the people who have the capital to invest in them, but they do require close and continuous work between the franchisor and the franchisee to maintain success. Now, business format franchises. Franchisors often provide training, such as Hamburger University or Chick-fil-A Academy. They provide financial guidance and, of course, supply channels of how to get the resources for the goods and services. Franchisees often benefit from the national advertising programs run by the franchisor, but franchisees are limited in their goods and services, their vendors, or operating hours because that is set by the franchisor. So, for example, Chick-fil-A being closed on Sunday, that is set by the franchisor. The franchisee does not get an opinion or a say in that matter. Continuing to break down different types of franchises, there is piggyback franchising. This is when a franchise operates within the facilities of another. You may have seen a Subway or a Domino's or some type of salon or barbershop within a Walmart. This is, of course, allowing the host to increase its products, goods, and services offered to the consumer, but it allows the franchisee access to the host customers as they're generally placed towards the main entrance and exits. People might be walking through and decide they get hungry after buying socks and stop at the Subway or the Domino's or whatever restaurant is established within the host. Another type of franchising is product name franchise. This is an independent sales relationship between the supplier, aka the franchisor, and the dealer, the franchisee, where they're going to stock and sell a specific line of goods. Very common, we see this in the automobile industry and dealerships, car dealerships, or exclusive distributorships. This allows the person to buy specific products and then sell them in turn from the franchisor. The characteristics of this type of franchise is that products are bought on consignment or straight from the supplier. Therefore, when a car is sold, part of the profit goes back to the franchisor. For example, Chevrolet. The business name is often chosen by the franchisee or named after the person. So All American Chevrolet or Don Hewitt Ford, whatever the local person is that bought and operates the franchise. But the franchisee has to have a great deal of experience and have the financial ability to show the franchisor of the plan for success before the franchisor generally agrees to letting them operate the business. Another type of startup option is multi-level marketing. This pays a commission on sales to people who work at 2 or more level. Sales representatives generally work independent, selling a product or a good and services and getting others to sell them as well. And so Bob might recruit 2 people, and they're all 3 of them trying to sell products, whether it's Pampered Chef or some type of vitamin, nutrients, and they each get a percentage of the commission, and then Bob gets a percentage of those that he recruited, and this continues on and on. Representatives receive, quote, payouts from the people who are under them that are recruited into the business. Now, there are some advantages and disadvantages with the characteristics of this. For example, most people become representatives because they like the product and they genuinely believe in it. Most distributors are home-based and offer flexible scheduling for those that are incredibly busy. Most of the time, representatives can get started for $100 or less. Commissions and bonus structures differ between the companies, and many times they offer a variety of products which they will try to sell. But representatives determine their income by the amount of time and energy they put into it, by developing the levels underneath them to get payouts, and of course developing business contracts. However, this has been very often the focal point of many pyramid schemes where the man is recruiting or the woman is recruiting to get payouts from other people without doing any of the work. So always check with the Better Business Bureau before joining or starting a multi-level marketing business. You may have seen influencers pushing goods. That is an example of multi-level marketing. Another type of startup is licensing. This is when an owner's authorization for another entity to use, trademark, intellectual, copyright, or patented material for a specific activity or a specific period of time, and both profit from this activity. So for example, the NFL will license out the rights to the name so that people can make t-shirts, jackets, and other things to support their team. The people who manufacture the goods get to keep profits, but also those that license out the rights to that name also receive part of the profits. Those involved in licensing is the licensor, the one that owns the material, the IP, the patent, the licensee, the buyer, and the licensee pays royalty to the licensors in addition to a fee to get the initial contract in order to license out the goods. Many types and sizes of businesses grant licensing for different items to include technology, intellectual information or IP, industrial processes and methods, formulas, recipes, recognizing name brands or logos, music, arts, and of course inventions with patents. The last startup we're going to cover in this is known as a joint venture, also known as a strategic alliance. This is when 2 or more businesses enter into a relationship by combining complementary resources or skills such as technology, capital, or distribution channels for the benefit of all parties, like Kellogg's and Wilmer. Now, the relationship is usually short-term, involves a single project or transaction. However, it can be a long-running partnership and joint venture as well. It can help businesses reach new target markets and develop new profit centers for less money than it would take to do them alone. One example of this would be Dr. Pepper, one of the fastest rising sodas of late, and they use both Pepsi and Coca-Cola distribution channels, and the shape of the bottle determines of what factory it came out of. If it's very cone shaped, it's going to be out of a Coca-Cola plant. If it's round at the top and gets narrower at the bottom, it came from a Pepsi distributor. And so that's an example of a joint venture. So let's take a moment and think about how we can apply this. Think about a few businesses within your town and try to name one example of each: a sole proprietorship, a partnership, a corporation, a nonprofit, and a franchise. Which of these businesses and which of these types of businesses would you like to own? Why would you like to own that particular one? What separates it from others of the same style and type of business? Before we wrap up, we're going to talk about a gray zone. It's important to include ethics in business, and so let's examine this scenario. A corporation first offers shares to the public in an initial public offering known as an IPO. Companies can find ways to make an IPO work to their advantage. For example, a company might offer shares at the price of $10,000 per share, Or they can restrict potential investors from buying in unless they purchase a certain number of shares. So they might require someone to purchase 10 shares for a grand total of $10,000 to buy into the company. This shuts out smaller investors and only makes it available to wealthier individuals and institutionalized investors who are investing for their clients. Although it's not illegal, many consider it unethical. What do you think? If you were opening a company, would you limit how much people can invest into the startup? That wraps up our lesson. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Check us out on Teachers Pay Teachers, YouTube, Rumble, and the Kloeker Education Foundation. Our next lesson on customer relations is just a click away. I'll see you there.